Okay, let's spend some time talking about system preferences. If you're from a Windows background, you might know Control Panel, and that's where you can do a lot of fine-tuning of your computer, things like the desktop and screensaver, and we just looked at the dock, so I'm going to bounce to this tab right here and show you some fun stuff you can do. I want to talk to you about a change that came about in the Ventura version of macOS. There was a pretty significant change in that system preferences became system settings. So when I open this, it now looks a lot more like you would expect to see on an Apple iOS device, like an iPhone, for example. Under General, you can see that I've got tabs like find out about the computer, and I can use the software update feature to stay up to date on bug fixes and releases and that type of thing. And if I come over here to desktop and dock, that's where you're going to see a lot of those settings where you can adjust where the dock lives and different features that dictate the behavior of the dock. It's less visual than the system preferences look and feel was. Toggling the option on or off is how you can do things like automatically hide and show the dock. So if I check that, you see that the dock goes away, and if I move my mouse down here, it'll reappear. It's just a little bit different in terms of the way it's laid out, but all the same features are still here. So like if I go down to mouse, that's where I would be able to control gestures and settings like that. Because I'm on a traditional mouse, I don't see those same settings, but if I pop over to this knowledge article, you'll see that this article in particular talks about how to right-click on a Mac, and that's a Windows term. Mac calls it secondary click, so like an alternate click. So if I left-click and drag over this, I can highlight text, for example, but if I right-click or alternate click, secondary click, in other words, I get this sub-menu. So now I can look up Control click, I can search Google for that term, I can open it in reading mode, and so forth. And you can see on this image here that if I had a magic mouse, and if I were to click the top right portion of the magic mouse, it would perform that secondary click behavior. And you can change that setting as well. So from the drop down here, you can choose a different setting to get that behavior to appear. So if I scroll down and I look at trackpad, you'll see that this is by default set to that 2-finger click. And again, if I want to change that behavior, I can click the selection here in the secondary click menu item. So this gives you an idea of how you can control things in system settings. This article is great because you can drill into, what all the different settings mean. So it tells you like quiet click. If you don't want your trackpad to make a sound when you click it, you could turn that on or off. I'll include a link to this knowledge article, and if you have any questions, I encourage you to explore it. But really, I just wanted to call out that system settings is different than system preferences, starting with the Ventura version of macOS. So any modern version you have now is going to look more like what you see on my screen right now. And, one big call out for Sequoia, for example, is the introduction of Apple Intelligence. So this is where you can configure Siri, you can turn on ChatGPT and then dictate how that behaves. And I encourage you to read the Apple Intelligence and Privacy document, because this talks more about how the Apple Intelligence operates. And if you wanted to read more about the ChatGPT version, you can read the Open AI terms of use. And in there, there's an option to opt out of data collection, for example. If you don't want what you put into the AI chat feature to be used to train the AI models, for example, this is how you can opt out of that stuff if you so choose. All right, thank you so much for watching. The dock can be changed and that the size can be rearranged. So you can make it very tiny. This is about as large as mine will go. If you turn on magnification and then you hover over an icon, it does this old school Mac thing where the application gets big so you can really see what it is. And it's kind of fun to roll through it if you like the larger icons rather than these tiny ones. So if you turn on magnification, you get that effect. And if I turn that off, you'll see that the dock just stays flat, and I have to hover over my application to see what the name of it is, but over time you start to memorize the iconography of the application. This feature here where it says double click a Windows title bar to zoom or to minimize is when you double click the gray area here. So let me open a different application like Slack, and if I double click it, it makes it larger, and then if I double click it again. Now if I were to change that to minimize and I double click it, it minimizes the application. I'll go down here and bring Slack back into focus, and I'm going to switch that back to zoom because I actually do like that feature where I can double click something and then it just goes to a full screen view, and then when I double click it again, it brings it down to this customized shape that I created. So that's what that means. You can also minimize your windows into a specific application icon. So if I minimize Slack, you see that it now goes into the application. When I click on it, again, it brings it back up. If I alternate click, you can see that I have my Slack open, and that's how I can bring it back. So that's kind of a fun one. If you don't like having this area down here at the bottom where all of your open applications are minimized and you just want it to minimize directly into the app, you can play around with that setting. Right here, this is a fun one. Automatically hide and show the dock. So you see that my dock went away, and then if I scroll down with my mouse and hover down here, I can find the application that I want to use. And if I pair that with magnification, if I come down here, I can get that larger view of the applications, and then when I move my mouse up, I get all this screen real estate. So that's kind of a fun one. I like to keep it locked there. If you wanted to, you could move your dock to the left or right. So this is the dock on the left, and then I have that magnification feature open, so you can see all the applications that way. And if I turn that off, then it just shows me the name of the application. I like having mine at the bottom, so I'm going to click that back on. So you get the idea with how you can really manipulate the dock and menu bar by going into this application known as System Preferences that looks like a gear icon. And just kind of run through a few more options you have here. This whole area is about iCloud, which we're not going to go into for this course, but definitely worth sharing some information about the General tab, because this is where you can customize your computer. You know, if you don't want the look and feel light, you can change this to dark mode, and you can adjust it so your computer detects the light you're in and will do different things. And you can change the accent color of applications and really trick out your Mac. If you want to change the desktop and screensaver, you can customize this to your liking, search your computer really quickly. And if you look here at keyboard shortcuts, I turned mine off because this particular shortcut key I use a lot in the audio recording software I use to initiate a recording for an armed track. So like if I want to record my vocal or a guitar part or something, I just hit Command Space on my keyboard and the application will start recording audio. If you wanted to turn that on here, essentially this would happen. So you see the magnifying glass up here. If I click that, it brings up Spotlight. So I can search for applications. I can quickly look up documents, do all kinds of stuff. As you can see, one important area to pay attention to is notifications and focus. So if I open this up, you can see all the applications that want to get my attention, and you can dictate how these applications behave in terms of whether or not they can alert you. So if I look at Slack, most of the time, I just want to know that I have a new message. So I don't turn the alert on. And if I have, this checked, show previews, it shows a preview of the actual Slack. So, if there's sensitive information in that, I don't want that to pop up when I'm sharing my desktop, for example. So I tend to turn that off. You can do that for all these applications. so you can really control. And I personally find it easier to focus when I go to these things intentionally and find out if there's something there I want to know about rather than having the app tell me all the time. And one way to further control your focus time is to click on focus. And you can see here that between 11 p.m. and 8 a.m., I have this do not disturb feature on. In the early morning is when I do my best writing, for example, and I just don't want to be disturbed with notifications and alerts, including text. So I turn that on, and then you can go into this do not disturb feature, and you can customize this if you wanted to add more focus time for yourself. Yeah, so you can really have some fun in there. And then just getting back to the main area for system preferences, you can see where, there's a lot of adjustments you can make to all the parameters of your computer, including sound and Bluetooth, and making changes to the network settings, your energy saver. If you want your computer to go to sleep after a certain amount of time, for example, this is where you can make these changes. So in the next video, we're going to dive into trackpad, and this applies if you have a Magic Mouse as well, but the trackpad offers what's called gestures. And to me, that's really where you start to get the most out of your Mac, because doing things like opening several desktops enhances your ability to work between these areas so that you can toggle between open desktops, and just knowing what all that means and how to configure that stuff is very helpful. I find the more you start to become familiar with the gestures, the more your workflow on the computer changes. It's fun to take advantage of that stuff, which again, to me, is really what makes the Mac so special. So yeah, in the next video, we're going to talk about trackpad.